What's going on, my dear friends? Today in this video, let's learn and master the Angular framework's latest version. So let's get started. Alright guys, in the previous lecture, we learned about how to send data from the parent component to the child component. So guys, now in this lecture, we are going to talk about how a child component can send information back to its parent component in Angular. This is super useful when you guys want to component to talk to each other. Alright, so let's dive into how to pass data from child component to the parent component. For this guys, we can't use the input decorator here because we don't have the parent component selector inside the child component, right? So because of that, we can't use the input decorator method to pass the data in the child component to the parent component. So in order to use this input decorator method, always there should be an input element. Otherwise, we can't use this, right? So in the previous lecture, we passed data to the child component by binding it to the component selector. So hope you guys remember this. Alright, so guys, now what I want to do is I want to pass a message from the post list component to the app component. In other words, from this child component to the parent component. So how do we do that? Guys, for this we have two methods in Angular. So the first one is using the viewChild decorator and the second one is using the output decorator and the event emitter. So in this lecture, we'll look at the first method using viewChild. We'll cover the second method in the next lecture. Alright, so let's see this data flow from child to parent using the viewChild in action. So this time we want to share data from the child to the parent component. So create a variable inside the child component, which is the post list component. So inside the post list component, create a variable called child message. And this variable type will be string. After this, set some text as the value for this variable like hello from child component. Alright, so now we have the variable. Now let's access this variable from the parent app component. For that, as I said, we will use the viewChild decorator. So guys, simply this viewChild will look inside the child component and let us access the variable stored inside the child component from the parent component. So let's do this. Open the app component TS file and first thing first, let's add the import statement. So top here, add this. So guys, this viewChild also coming from this Angular core module. So put this inside the same import section. So simply add the viewChild module inside these curly brackets. After this, add a comma and add the module viewChild. Carefully follow these capital simple letters. This first V and the C letters must be capital. So next, inside the component class scope, let's add the viewChild decorator to look inside the child component. So add viewChild decorator. So how do we add that? Same as the input decorator, we have to add this with the @ symbol. So after this, so add a @ symbol and after this viewChild decorator. So once again, carefully follow these capital simple letters. So after this, add the parentheses, open and close simple brackets. So guys, next this viewChild required a parameter. So inside this parentheses, we have to pass the child component that we want to get the data from. So right now we want to get the data from the post list component, which is the child component. Okay, so put this post list component inside the viewChild parentheses. So next we have to give it a name. This can be any name. So let's call it child message and set this type as any. That's it. So alright guys, so now we have captured the post list component, child components using this view child decorator. Next, we need to access the child component and get that variable message to parent, which carrying our message that we want to load inside the parent component. So first thing first, let's log and see what's coming from this view child. So let's log this inside the constructor now. So create a constructor here. How do we create a constructor method? Very simple, just simply add the keyword constructor and after this parentheses and the constructor method scope. So now inside this constructor block, log the view child property and see what we get. So add this console.log inside parentheses, pass this variable child message. So actually this view child will access this child component and store the child component's instance inside this variable. So simply just log this child message variable. So inside this parentheses, pass the variable name this dot child message. Perfect. So now save this all and go to the browser. Inside the browser console, as you guys can see here, we got undefined here. So what is this and why we get this undefined? What's going on here? Can you guys guess? Before we continue this lecture, quickly let's recap what we did. We used the viewChild decorator to access a child component's data from the parent component. So we tried to log the child component's data inside the constructor of the parent component. But when we checked the browser console, we saw undefined, which means this log returning this undefined. So what's going on here? So guys, when the constructor of the parent component is called, the child component hasn't been fully created yet. That's why when we try to log the child message variable inside the constructor, it shows undefined in the browser console. So in simple terms, the child component isn't ready at that moment. So in other words, at the time the app component is created, the postlist component is undefined. That's why we are getting undefined printed inside the browser console. So guys, in order to fix this and access this child message, we need to wait until the child component is fully initialized inside the browser. For this, Angular provides a special lifecycle hook called ngAfterWaveInit. So this hook runs after Angular has fully initialized the component's view and its child views inside the browser. Guys, wait. I know you guys may wonder what is this lifecycle hook and these methods. So don't worry about this, we have a complete section for these lifecycle hooks. Just go through these steps only to complete this lecture. Alright, so let's do this. So go to the app component is file. First we need to import AfterWaveInit from Angular core. So top here add this hook name inside this same Angular core import. So the hook name is AfterWaveInit. Once again guys, carefully follow these capital symbol letters. Alright, next we need to implement this AfterWaveInit lifecycle hook in this app component class. So then only we can use this lifecycle hook inside this app component. Otherwise this will throw an error. So after this app component class, add this implements keyword and the hook AfterWaveInit. So once again follow these capital simple letters carefully, otherwise this code can be break. Next let's create the lifecycle method, same like this constructor method. So inside this app component class scope, create this method. The method name is ngAfterWaveInit. This name must be same as this, so carefully follow this naming convention. So after this add the parentheses and the method scope. Now guys, inside this method log the viewChild property again. So create a console log and inside this pass this variable child message. That's it. So now save this and go to the browser. Reload the page and open the browser console. Now as you guys can see here, we have this undefined and this object printed inside the browser console. So guys, this undefined is coming from the constructor method, and this child component object is coming from the after weave init lifecycle hook, which means guys that our child component is now fully initialized and we can access its data using the weave child. So once again, the constructor method runs too early before the child component is not ready and loaded inside the browser. So that's why we are getting this undefined. So this ng after weave init runs after the parent weave and the child weaves are fully initialized. So at this moment, the child component is ready and we can access its data. So that's how we got this object printed inside the browser. So hope you guys got the idea. Alright, so now let's look at this log. As you guys can see here, viewChild method captured and returned this object. So the object name is PostList component, which is our child component. If I expand this, inside this we get our parent variable and its message, which we created inside the PostList component. So now we got this inside our parent app component. Wait, let's create another variable inside the PostList component, something post count. So set this type to number and set a default value 0. So save this and go to the browser. So now if you look at this object further, we can see the post count variable too. So guys, this is the beauty of viewChild. So with this viewChild decorator, we can access all the PostList components variable from the parent app component. So hope you guys got the idea. Alright, so now we have the data, but let's show this inside the browser. So how do we do that? For this we can use same like previous string interpolation approach, right? So inside the app component HTML file, create a p tag, and inside this add the string interpolation. Inside this add the viewChild variable, which is the child message. So guys, this is an object. In order to show the child message, we have to pass that object key name here. So which is this variable name. So pass this after this dot. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. We got nothing here. Why is that? Inside the browser console, we got this undefined error. So what's going on here again? Can you guys tell me? Yes, of course. So guys, if you remember, when we logged the viewChild value using the constructor method, we got the same undefined problem. The same reason is causing the string interpolation undefined error as well. The problem here is the same as before. The child component isn't ready when the constructor runs. So when we try to use child message in string interpolation, it's still undefined because the viewChild hasn't been initialized yet. So in order to fix this, we need to make sure that the child component is fully initialized before we use its data in the parent component. We already know that ng after weave init is the right place to handle this because it runs after the weave, including the child components, has been fully initialized. So we learned about this, right? So instead of trying to use child message directly in the string interpolation, we should assign it to a variable in the parent component after the weave has been initialized. So in the ng after weave init method, we can set this variable and then use this new variable in the string interpolation. So let's see this in action. Create a variable something message inside the app component is file, class scope. Set this type as a string and assign an empty string value. So inside the lifecycle method, assign this viewChild message value to this new variable. So inside this dot message equal sign. So after this viewChild variable, so this dot child message. So after this, the variable name of the message variable that we declared inside the child component, which is this. So pass that here after this dot. So now inside the string interpolation, simply pass this message variable. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. Beautiful, right? So we got this message from the child component, which is coming from the post list component. So guys, this is how we pass data from the child component to the parent component using the view child decorator. So once again guys, don't worry about the lifecycle method. We will dive deeper into this in a later section. So just get an idea about how to share data from child component to a parent component using the view child decorator. Perfect. Alright, in the last video we learned how to pass data between a child component and a parent component using the view child decorator. Now let's look at how to pass data from a child component to a parent component using the second method, the output decorator and the event emitter. So guys, this approach is useful when you want to see data changes that occur on things like button clicks or user interactions. So think that I want to send a message to the parent component when click the send message button on the child component. So how do we do that? Well, let's see this in action. So first for this also, let's create a new variable inside the child component, which is the postlist component. So inside the postlist component, create a variable called something parent message. And this variable type will be a string. Next, set the value to something like message from the child component using click event. Now let's create a button inside the post list component template because I want to send this message to parent component when click a button, right? So go to the post list component HTML file and create a simple button. The button text will be send message to parent. Next, inside the button tags, add a click event. In Angular, we use parentheses for events, right? So inside the parentheses, the event is click. Next, from here, let's call to a method something send message. So pass this inside of quotes. After this, don't forget to add the parentheses. Perfect. So guys, this calls send message method when the button is clicked. Alright, so as you guys can see here, we are getting this error. Why is that? Because this method is still not defined. So let's define this send message method inside the postlist component class. So go to the postlist component ts file. Inside the class scope, create the send message method. So the method name is send message. After this, parentheses and the method scope. Now inside this method, we want to emit the child message to the event emitter. Before that, let's make sure the button click event works. So head a console log inside this method, console.log, and pass this message button clicked. Don't forget to add this inside quotes. Alright, so save this and go to the browser, click the button, and as you guys can see here, this button clicked log printed inside the browser console. So which means this click event is working as we expected. So alright, now let's get into the real business. Now let's see how to send this message to the parent component when click the send message button. So for this, we need to create a new event emitter with the output decorator. So for that, first we have to import output and event emitter into the post list component from the Angular core. So put these imports inside the same import statement. So after this and this, first let's add the event emitter. So carefully follow these capital simple letters. So after this comma and next the output decorator. So this O is capital. Now next add the output decorator inside the class scope. So how do we add the output decorator? The same as the input decorator. So first add the @ symbol and the decorator name output. This O must be capital. So after this, name it something like message event and assign it to a new event emitter. So don't forget to add the parentheses after this event emitter. So guys, this event emitter will handle the event we want to emit. Okay. So guys, we have created the event emitter. Now we want to emit this message when this button is clicked. So let's see this in action. Guys, let's emit the message to the event emitter. So inside the send message method, because we are calling this method when we click event occur, right? So inside this method, add this dot message event, which is this output variable. After this dot and emit, inside the parentheses, pass the message that we want to emit to this output variable, which is this parent message. So pass this inside this parentheses. So this dot parent message. That's it. So guys, this will emit the parent message into this output variable every time the button is clicked. Alright, so next we need to capture this event in the parent component. So how do we do that? So like the input method, we have to use this child component selector to capture the data that's sending from the child component. So open the app component HTML file and find the selector for the postlist component. So inside this selector, bind the message event to a method in the parent component. So inside this selector, add this open and close brackets. Inside this, pass the output variable, which is this message event. After this, bind this to a method something called receive message, and after this add the parentheses, and the value of this event will assign to the event property. So pass that to this as a parameter. So inside this add $event. So guys, what's happening here? Guys, in here we are using the event binding approach to listen for the message event output variable that we defined in our child component. When this event is emitted, it will trigger the receive message method in our parent component, passing along whatever the data was emitted when this event is triggered as this $event parameter variable. Now you might be wondering, where is this receive message method? We haven't created it yet. So that's why we are getting this compile error. So let's go ahead and implement this method in our parent component. So go to the app component is file, and inside the class scope, create the receive message method. So the method name is receive message. After this, the parentheses and the method scope. So next, this method will take a parameter. So define that here. The parameter variable name something message and set this type as string. Now inside the method, let's log the parameter variable to see what we are getting. So add this console.log and inside parentheses pass this parameter variable, which is this message. Now save this and go to the browser. Click this button again, and as you guys can see here, this printed the message from the child component in the browser console. Awesome, right? So this shows that we successfully passed the data from the child component to the parent component using the output decorator event emitter. So guys, this is not done yet. So in order to display this message in the parent components template, first create a variable in the parent component class. So let's call it message from child. So, and its type will be string. After this, assign an empty value. Now inside the receive message method, assign the event parameter to this variable. This dot message from child assign message, which is this parameter variable. So guys, finally use the string interpolation to display this message in the parent component template. So open the app component HTML file, and inside this create a paragraph tag. Inside this string interpolation, use two curly brackets. Now pass the message from child variable between these string interpolation. Now save everything and go to the browser. Now when you click the button, you should see the message from the child component displayed in the parent component. Beautiful, right? So guys, this is how we pass data from a child component to a parent component using the output decorator and the event emitter.